No time to say goodbye. Chapter 1. Do you think, because I am poor, obscure, plain and little, I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart. Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre. I am here because I worked too hard and too long not to be here. But although I told the university that I would walk across the stage to take my diploma, I won't. At age 57, I'm too damned old, and I'd look ridiculous in this crowd. From where I'm standing in the back of the hall, I can see that I am at least 2 decades older than most of the parents of these kids in their black caps and gowns. So I'll graduate with this class, but I won't walk across the stage and collect my diploma with them. I'll have the school send it to my house. I only want to hear my name called. I'll imagine what the rest would have been like. When you've had a life like mine, you learn to do that, to imagine the good things. The ceremony is about to begin. It's a warm June day and a hallway of glass doors leading to the parking lot are open. The dignitaries march onto the stage. A janitor slams the doors shut, one after the other. That banging sound. It's Christmas Day 1961 and 3 Waterbury cops are throwing their bulk against our sorely overmatched front door. They are wearing their long woolen blue coats and white gloves, and they swear at the cold. They finally come for us, in the dead of night, to take us away, just as our mother said they would. They'll come and get you kids, she screamed at us, and put yous all in an orphanage where you'll get the beatings yous deserve, and there won't be no food either. That's why we're terrified, that's why we don't open the door, and that's how I remember that night. I was 6 years old then, 1 month away from my 7th birthday. My older brother, the perpetually worried, white-haired Paulie, was 10. He is my half-brother, actually, although I have never thought of him that way. He was simply my brother. My youngest brother, Denny, was 6, Maura, the baby, was 4, and Bridget, our auburn-haired leader, my half-sister, was 12. We didn't know where our mother was. The welfare check, and thank God for it, had arrived, so maybe she was at a gin mill downtown spending it all, as she had done a few times before. Maybe she'd met yet another guy, another barfly, who wouldn't be able to remember our names because his beer-soaked brain can't remember anything. We are thankful that he'll disappear after the money runs out or the social worker lady comes around and tells him he has to leave because the welfare won't pay for him as well as for us. It snowed that day, and after the snow had finished falling, the temperature dropped and the wind started. Maybe she went to Brooklyn, Polly said, as we walked through the snow to the Salvation Army offices that afternoon before the cops came for us. She didn't go back to New York, Bridget snapped. She probably just. She always says she gonna leave and go back home to Brooklyn, I interrupted. Yeah, Denny chirped, mostly because he was determined to be taken as our equal in all things, including this conversation. We walked along in silence for a second, kicking the freshly fallen snow from our paths, and then Polly added what we were all thinking, maybe they put her back in St. Mary's. No one answered him. Instead, we fell into our own thoughts, recalling how, several times in the past, when too much of life came at our mother at once, she broke down and lay in bed for weeks in a dark room, not speaking and barely eating. It was a frightening and disturbing thing to watch. It don't matter, Bridget snapped again, more out of exhaustion than anything else. She was always cranky. The weight of taking care of us, and of being old well before her time, strained her. It don't matter, she mumbled. It didn't matter that night either, that awful night, when the cops were at the door and she wasn't there. We hadn't seen our mother for 2 days, and after that night, we wouldn't see her for another 2 years. When we returned home that day, the sun had gone down and it was dark inside the house because we hadn't paid the light bill. We never paid the bills, so the lights were almost always off and there was no heat because we didn't pay that bill either. And now we needed the heat. We needed the heat more than we needed the lights. The cold winter winds pushed up at us from the Atlantic Ocean and down on us from frigid Canada and battered our part of northwestern Connecticut, shoving freezing drifts of snow against the paper-thin walls of our ramshackle house and covering our windows in a thick veneer of silver-colored ice. The house was built around 1910 by the factories to house immigrant workers mostly brought in from southern Italy. These mill houses weren't built to last. They had no basements, only 4 windows, all in the front, and paper-thin walls. Most of the construction was done with plywood and tar paper. The interiors were long and narrow and dark. Bridget turned the gas oven on to keep us warm. "Yous go get the big mattress and bring it in here by the stove," she commanded us. Denny, Polly, and I went to the bed that was in the cramped living room and wrestled the stained and dark mattress, with some effort, into the kitchen. Bridget covered Maura in as many shirts as she could find, in a vain effort to stop the chills that racked her tiny and frail body and caused her to shake. We took great pains to position the hulking mattress in exactly the right spot by the stove and then slid, fully dressed, under a pile of dirty sheets, coats, and drapes that was our blanket. We squeezed close to fend off the cold, the baby in the middle and the older kids at the ends. "Move over, ya Utes, ya," Polly would say to Denny and me because half of his butt was hanging out onto the cold linoleum floor. We could toss insults in Yiddish. We learned them from our mother, whose father was a Jew and who grew up in a Jewish neighborhood in New York. I assumed that those words we learned were standard American English and wide and constant use across our great land. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s and moved from the Naugatuck Valley and Connecticut that I came to understand that most Americans would never utter a sentence like, "you and your fakakta plans." We also spoke with the Waterbury aversion to the sound of the letter T, replacing it with the letter D,